people keep abusing workers, we need labor unions. They're not redundant.
I think now in the 21st century, work is going to change more than it ever did before, and I think we need labor unions as one strong partner for the employees to make sure that they have a secure workplace in the future as well and can contribute a part and are not just replaced by a superior technology.
Because when the people have less job, they have less money, the economy collapses. What's the point of making more if people can't buy anymore?
I think everyone is getting confronted with AI. And we as newly graduated students, even if we don't have the experience or the knowledge yet, we need to have it at some point for sure.
We think now that with AI we are gods, but if we don't learn how to master ourselves, we'll never learn how to master the thing we create.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and thank you very much for being here. I have to say, in my 5 or 6 years of moderating debates at St. Gallen, it's rare that we get the chance to examine the theories of Karl Marx here on the podium. But that's exactly what we're here to do over the next 30 minutes. Capital versus labor. 170 years ago, Marx examined that unique relationship and the tensions that are contained within that relationship through the optics of issues that were affecting workers back in those days, which were inhumane working conditions, also health and safety issues. Well, today, that tension between employees and employers still remains very much part of our lives. It's also being changed by new forces like digitization and also the advent of artificial intelligence as well. This has left many workers asking themselves, will a robot perhaps take my job one day? What kind of jobs will be there for my children and my grandchildren? And from the employer's perspective, companies themselves are having to ask, you know, can I afford not to embrace this type of technology because I may not be able to compete with other people in the marketplace over the next generation? These may seem like existential questions, and they very much are, but over the next half an hour, I hope that our two guests can come up with some concrete solutions as well to shape this particular debate. Just to open things up with a really stark statistic, if you're not specifically aware of how challenging an environment this is for the workforce, just factor in this piece of research by McKinsey, which estimated that across the world, that by 2030, some 400 million jobs could be lost to automation. And for the people among those 400 million who need to find meaningful employment, about 375 million of them may well have to retrain, reskill, or find another type of job. Right, so let's start out by introducing our guests. As Jason just mentioned, we're delighted to be in the company of Philip Jennings, a global warrior for workers' rights, the head of the Global Union, which you founded back in the year 2000, and also from the employer's perspective, we're delighted to be joined by the Secretary General of the IOE, the International Organization of Employers, Roberto Suárez Santos. Your organization represents about 150 businesses and is recognized by the ILO as the sort of voice of business internationally. So hopefully we'll get a debate from both sides here over the next 30 minutes. So I'm going to start out by asking you, Philip Jennings. We're 3 days away from May Day, when across capital cities all over the world, people stand up for their workers' rights. And increasingly, it seems as though the debate is one that is looking backward, not forward. People standing up for workers' rights when perhaps at the end of the day, they should be thinking about how their jobs will change, and indeed whether they will have a job, or whether automation will affect their lives radically in ways that we can only just start to understand.
As a labour movement, we're obliged to always be looking forward, and we're obliged to be considerate of the working conditions of our members and how they feel about life and how they feel about their jobs. You mentioned May Day. Democratic spaces are closing. The situation for people like me and my organizations, and I have 900 of them around the world, for them to associate and to join unions and to negotiate collective agreements is as bad now as it's ever been in the post-war period. There is a closing of democratic spaces for our movement, for our members, and for the kind of things that we would like to do. So that's one point I'd like to make. Secondly, it reminds me of the story of the American tourist in Ireland that stopped his car and asked for some help to get to his destination. And the local looked at the tourist and said, well, if I was you, I wouldn't start from here. And if you look at the world's labor market, just a few statistics, there are 3.2 billion people at work. 1 billion surviving on less than $2 a day. We have 150 million children at work. We have 40 million people in conditions of slavery, which is higher than the slave trade. The wealth produced is on the increase, no doubt. But the share of that wealth going to working people is in decline. And all of this has impacts on people and how they look at life, how they feel about life, how they feel about their democracies, how they feel about the persons and the people that they're working for. We have, you mentioned Marx. I noticed the other day the Financial Times did a 3-page leader on Marx, and they said, well, we didn't have to change. If we were to rewrite his manifesto, we wouldn't actually be changing very much. So please take into this context the rights issue, look into a situation of a labor market which is not working, and we see the digital revolution coming, and we're trying to shape its future. And it's not like the financial crisis when the Queen was visiting, I think, the Bank of England, and she asked a question, didn't anybody see this coming? I mean, the Queen asked this question to all these financiers. And I remember at the time, there were a few siren calls, and they were kind of mocked. We know what's coming. And there is a sign also in the UK, keep calm and carry on from the war. Keep calm and carry on. To all the students and to all the business leaders, it needs leadership, but don't stay calm and don't just carry on as things are, because those solutions won't work.
Philip, let me ask you to be a bit more specific. What is coming from your point of view?
What is coming? Right. Right then. What is coming? In terms of the digital revolution, we are on the cusp of a massive wave of technological change. I don't think this is in dispute anywhere. And when we see the wave of change coming, David Bowie said, the future belongs to those who can see it coming. So we looked at the numbers of McKinsey. We've looked at the statistics. It's not from the labor movement. What is coming is a technological wave which has labor substitution effects on a dramatic scale. McKinsey numbers is 5% of all jobs could be automatable. They say 800 million people have to be retrained in any case.
They also say that half of the activities that all of the people around the world could do could actually be done by a robot. So not everybody's job, but a large portion of activities that people do on a day-to-day basis.
The point we're making is there's an urgency of now. A technological wave is happening. It will accelerate. And it is very difficult to find anyone that says, keep calm and carry on. Therefore, the impacts on our labor market are going to be dramatic. The impact on working people, for those in work and those looking for work, is going to be dramatic because of the substitution effects. And our message is, our warning is, are we really prepared for the magnitude of change? We are under-investing in people. And I think businesses are under-investing in people. And therefore, we have to prepare people. We have to be prepared. We have to look at the labor market institutions. We have to look at collaborative efforts, because we can't hide from this fact that change is coming. It's on its way. It's dramatic. It's different. And therefore, we have a growing world population to take care of. It is no answer to leave it to the market. It is no answer to leave the business model as is. So in short, change, job losses, restructuring, reskilling, the whole piece, everything is up for grabs.
Give you a seat at the table to talk through those challenges as they happen. Let me just come to Roberto Suárez Santos for a second. Do you agree with that assessment? Should our businesses try to keep calm and carry on? Are you not taking into account enough the changes that your workforce is worried about?
May go back also to the issue of the scenario. I think that there are different scenarios in the forecast also of McKinsey and other research. Okay, so it depends very much on how intelligent we are in terms of our policies, and that's the key question. Of course, there are many ways to look at the future. There are the classical way based on fears. we'll have a huge job loss scenario. We'll have freedom of association weakening. I think that we also have to look at 100 years back, or even 50 years back, how freedom was in the world. We also have to look at the new opportunities that are being created, not just in developed economies, but also in developing economies. How many individuals are now having much more opportunities because precisely new technologies. We also have to look at how health is improving in many countries in terms of individuals. We have also to look at the middle class growing in countries where you didn't have middle class, like Brazil, like China, like also big economies, even in the case of Bangladesh, where we have strong issues of fundamental principles and rights at work. Things, to some extent, are moving. At the same time, there is big challenge in terms of jobs as we know it now. And that's something that we have to realize. That's something that we have to realize, and we have to have the courage, and that's the big difficulty, the courage to look at the employment relationship, perhaps with a different angle.
What should the employment relationship look like from your point of view? What kind of
there is now
contract
a
would
big
work?
debate coming in the ILO. I mean, it has been around for already a while. Is this idea of standards and non-standard forms of employment. And the standard is open-ended contract, permanent contract, life contract. And if you take into account figures right now, these open-ended contracts, permanent contracts, just affect a small percentage of the entire population. Because what we are not realizing is that informality is affecting, in many countries, 80% of the workforce. So the way to look at the future is to admit and to assume that there is a diverse variety of new forms of employment, and is trying to tackle them, of course, with a new way to look at social protection schemes, perhaps. And then we have the courage. And then we need the courage to deal with that, to deal with this idea of stability as something that at the end of the day, we talk about millennials as having a new mindset, a new kind of approach, but at the end of the day, we all need stability, isn't it? And that's where we have to have the courage, the innovation approach. If we go back to ideas that are very classical, at the end of the day, like minimum universal income, taxing robots, also protectionism, those are classical answers to new realities and will not work. That's how we think. Sorry.
Well, we're just giving you a new microphone. I want to ask the conference organisers also if we can just put up this live voting question as well, because it might help us inform our debate, particularly with relevance to the points you were making as well, Roberto. As you can see here, the question is, in the context of labour market changes resulting from automation, are employers really protecting their employees from the negative consequences? Now, the answers you can choose here with your live voting abilities are yes, employers are taking full responsibility. No, they are taking all measures that they are taking all measures that they could take, and no, they are not taking all the measures that they could take. So while we're waiting for the answers from the audience there to give us an idea of what the audience at St. Gallen think about this, let me come to you, Philip. What's your response here to what Roberto was saying? Well, we've got to find innovative solutions here. I mean, the reality is that people's relationship with their job, with their work, with their future, their expectations from their, the monetary gain that they get from their day-to-day activities, frankly, hasn't changed for millennia, has it?
Yeah, I think what worries me a lot is that labour is becoming a commodity, that we're beginning to see a collapse in the quality of work and a collapse in the quality of the employment relationships. We're beginning to see a collapse in the distribution of the wealth which we see in terms of income. And when we look at the trends that we see in terms of poverty, 1 in 10 European Union citizens lives in poverty. In the United States of America, 8 out of 10 working people survive paycheck to paycheck. So the distribution mechanism needs to be fixed. And I know we've always had this tension of capital and labor, but clearly labor is suffering when the distribution mechanism breaks down. When it comes to new forms of employment, there's no doubt that we see abuses in trying to change what an employment relationship is. And as the question asked, for some of these new actors to say that they don't have responsibility. So we get this message from the new actors, the new platforms. We are just a platform, and therefore we are responsibility free. What happens on the platform is not our business, but we provide the platform. And what we've tried to do is to say, hang on a minute, there are tests that can be applied for an employment relationship. Don't try and skirt your responsibility by pretending you're not an employer when you are, because at the end of the day, it will drive even more insecurity, more a sense of vulnerability, more a sense of they don't care about us. And then that drives political decisions and options, which I don't think which are really in anybody's business. This employment relationship issue is fundamental. We want to broaden the scope. In our discussions with the G20, there was a decision, let's have a policy where we leave no one behind, where we have to maybe extend our labor laws to ensure these new forms of work are covered. Can we say to our people, you will have at least a living wage that can help you get through your day, that there will be mechanisms of negotiation, which means that some of those institutions that were built to ensure that there was a fairness, that there was an evenness in distribution, have to rebuild again. We say that the social contract died in 1973 and we've been suffering ever since.
Well, in fact, I believe in the 1970s, if I'm not wrong, your father was a tool maker on the Rover factory floor in Wales, and he, alongside his colleagues, got together to strike, to picket for more money. Collective bargaining, is that the way to get people around the table here and also to enforce this kind of idea of self-regulation? Or is it dead?
Put it this way, there were ways of expressing yourself in the 70s. One of them was to take strike action, but there are others. My appeal to everybody is, how can we give workers a voice on the job? They see the changes that are coming. They're not opposed to technology as such, but they realize change is coming, and they're basically saying, how can you accompany me through these changes? And to be accompanied through these changes means responsibilities for your labor market institutions, to have a social protection net which helps people through moments of risk. You know, if you say to a worker, your job is going to change 10 times in your lifetime, then you're going to say, I'm going to need 10 life belts to get through it. And how much room is there in this lifeboat for me? So we're going to have a continuous investment in people and give people a voice, get them engaged. In the UK, my father was a shop steward. Now we have more people on the shop floor in the UK who are training reps. It's a different kind of model from that which we saw in the 70s. And their job is to go around to the workplace, to draw workers' attention to where they feel their skills are falling. It's not something you can always do with an employer, and where your skills need to be developed, and these are the opportunities available to you. And hundreds of thousands of people have benefited as a result. So it's, this idea of a voice on the job, a living wage, a kind of industrial democracy of engagement and involvement, and you will find your workforce ready to get engaged, and don't pull the lever of dismissal. If there's one thing we learned during the crisis from 2008, when we were involved in these very tense, difficult negotiations at the G20 level, we made an appeal, tried to keep people in work, find a mechanism to keep people in work. In Germany they did, in the Nordic countries they did, and they recovered quickly. And I would say to the business community, with all these massive choices that you have, and we feel the pressures, what to do, where to invest, try to keep people in work, train them up, and reskill them for the future.
Roberto Suárez Santos, this is an issue that comes up time and time again, the idea of reskilling people on the job. And as Philip was saying, somebody loses their job, they can be out in a changing landscape, technologically, they can be out of the workforce for the rest of their lives. So whose job is it to foot the bill for reskilling workers? And is it enough to say, oh, don't worry, your job's going to change, you can have something different?
It's not, sorry, my micro. First of all, the debate on upskilling, reskilling is not new, but the theme here, again, the challenge, is the speed of change. It's not that I will not need to be reskilled, is that now, in 1 or 2 years' time, I have to be reskilled in a very drastic way. If I leave my organization, if I leave the IOE, to what extent I will be able to find another job because I have been properly reskilled, or have been properly responsible to find another job. We can talk about skills for the future, and we all talk about the STEM, the creativeness, the badly called the soft skills, which are very important and will be very important in terms also of bringing them together with the STEM skills. But at the end of the day, that's not the key question. The key question is not what would be the future skills, it's how I, as an individual and as a company, as a society, take the responsibility. And it's for sure that that has to be strengthened. It's for sure that we have to have a kind of mind attitude, which is quite different from the one that we have now. And the more that we deepen on that, the better we'll be able to find solutions, quick solutions for those that are getting out of the labor market. I have also to say that what matters at the end of the day is not to preserve jobs at any cost. And that's also a long debate that we have had, is to preserve the capacity of individuals to find another job. And there, the labor institutions will make a difference if they really are able to promote a smooth and good transitions from one job to another. Sometimes the best protection is to be able to find another job quickly, in less than 1 year. And that's also the many of the surveys, among them the McKinsey's survey, in one of the scenarios, which is the most positive one, is this short term of 1 year, being able to find another job will make the difference in terms of integration of labor market.
Well, let's just bring in the results from the live voting to see what the audience think about whether employers are doing enough on this particular subject. As you can see, no, they are not taking all measures that they could take. So there you go. This is the issue of trust, isn't it?
It's trust. That people have lost trust in their politicians. They've lost trust in business institutions. When they look at their daily lives, they feel like the people in power are not talking to them. And I say, or I see, the future of work gives an opportunity to political leaders and business leaders to reconnect with the realities at work. And that means we have to take on some giants here, and particularly the financialization of our economies, the financialization of decision making, the short-termism in business. We meet CEOs all the time. We're in a dialogue. And they say, look, I'm just about to go on the road show around various stock markets. They want to know how things have improved in the last 3 months. And we have working people whose lives depend on those decisions. Therefore, we have to have a new conversation. What does inclusive growth mean? If you want your society to have a sense of well-being and happiness and a sense of joy about where things are, you have to have inclusive growth, inclusive development. And this is not miraculous. Thank you. Thank you very much.
But the converse argument is...
But that doesn't sound like the 67% of you that were in favour of me. That only sounded...
Very good.
So, can't we get rid of shareholder value? There's trillions there's lots of money. The wealth out there is there. We're not talking about the fact that the wealth won't be there. The wealth will be there. But we have to distribute it in a better way. And whilst I've got the voice, we have to look at the structure of business in the whole world of data and the so-called FANGs.
Yeah.
Monopoly's back. Monopoly has egregious consequences on business and people. Has to be tackled.
I'm going to talk about that in a second, but what you were just mentioning there prompted something in my mind. In the UK, where I come from, the headlines yesterday were RBS, another high street bank, is shedding another couple of hundred jobs because they're going more online and things are going to be more automated. The reality also, Philip Jennings, is that the worker is also the customer, and they benefit from some of the savings that are made by automation. So where is the tipping point? Where is the balance here?
It's an old story. You may have heard it before. Henry Ford and Walter Reuther, the boss of the Automobile Workers Union, were on a factory visit, and Henry Ford looks at Walter Reuther and says, "Who's going to be paying your dues?" Because he was showing him all the automation. And the union leader turned around and said, "Well, who's going to be buying your cars?" And this is it. What we have seen, I'd like everyone to reflect on the economic consequences of inequality and the price that economies pay when the wage share is in decline and you have a workforce that is nervous, insecure, feeling precarious and vulnerable. And we have the wherewithal and the means to give a sense of security to accompany people through these changes. But we see, you know, the 90s was callous dismissal policies. Today, we have a degree of uncaringness about the ramifications of this on people, which really has to be addressed. And just look at the political consequences. When people feel left out, left behind, we see negative, difficult, consequential political consequences.
And Roberto Suárez Santos, just going back to Marx and his theories on wage, labour and capital, he eventually came to the conclusion that if the trust breaks down completely, then everybody throws their cards in the air, and it's terrible for the relationship between employers and also employees. So, you know, when you read the tea leaves, already, as Philip was pointing out, politically, economically, people are saying they're unhappy. They feel left out by globalization. They feel left out by this wave of automation. How can you rebuild that trust?
First of all, I think it is important that we talk based on evidence in terms of how things are evolving. Okay, because I think it's important to have emotions.
But people also don't trust the evidence on this as well. That's an issue.
Well,
people don't
if
trust.
we don't trust
no, but people.
At the end of the day, we have to have. Sorry to interrupt, Nina. But I think that at the end of the day, we need to be acting on a smart and intelligent way. At the end of the day, we need to know what the trends are here in the labor market, isn't it?
Thank you.
And there are two things. One is income inequalities, and that's a threat that we have. The other thing is related to the employment relationship, whether that's changing or not. The other element is trust among institutions. I wouldn't say this just on business. I mean, if you also look, I have to say that sometimes we all, also trade unions, when you look at the reality of developing economies and informality, to what extent we have been able to cope with that, because we are here in Switzerland or in Europe looking at a specific reality, but in developing economies, a huge number of individuals have not been following any of our discussions that we are having right now, and have been left behind for years. And it's now that we realize that this reality is coming in a better manner. So my question, your question is how to rebuild trust. First of all, this trust is down in a daily manner. I mean, it's something that is not built from one day to the other. Let's put it like that. But at the end of the day, the best efficient and impact manner to tackle a trust element, not just on business, but also in institutions, is a co-action from many institutions and many partners at the labor market. I think that would make a difference.
Now, I recognize that this is a very short period of time to tackle such a big question, and unfortunately, we're almost out of time. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that, obviously, we come out of this with a few recommendations and commitments from both sides. So I'm going to start out by asking you, Roberto, what kind of commitment you think that, you know, employers' lobbies can make towards reassuring nervous workers about their future. What kind of policy recommendations do you think politicians should be looking at? Because, like it or not, this is bleeding into our democratic system, as Philip Jennings mentioned.
Well, we have been working, at least from my organization, the IOE, in a specific action-oriented recommendations for the future of work. So that, and we can go to the detail, but at the end of the day, if I have to give you a message on how we should be moving, also as a business organization, I have to tell immediately that the best action that we have to take is to dissipate many of the fears that we have right now. And to anticipate...
Is that enough, though, to dissipate the fears, or to anticipate the
fears and to anticipate the reality? And that's what we are trying to do. That's what we are trying to do as business. We are going to our members worldwide to tell them, you have to act now before it's too late. And that's what we try with our network, which is a powerful network, I have to say.
What do you expect? And what do you expect them to do, your members?
We expect them to anticipate the reality of skills. We expect them to anticipate also the reality of employment.
And training?
And well, training is linked to skill, attitudes, as I was referring before. And we expect them also to bring a kind of effective partnership with different partners, of course, with the trade unions at national level. That's also what we are expecting also.
Philip, is that enough of a message for you, and what would you recommend policymakers consider?
I think it's real talk. I think what Roberto is saying, that he's got a job to do to convince his own community to to put things in order, and I hope that they can see this through. My message really is, these are problems which we can find solutions to. But it means tremendous change at the highest level in terms of inclusive growth and inclusive development, and the levers that can be pulled to ensure that there's inclusion of all actors and workers in that model. It means that we have to find new alternative economic models. We may have to find other ways of wealth distribution. We have to look at the business sector models, private, shareholder value, profit maximization, to hell with the rest, I don't think is any longer appropriate. And if that model continues, I appeal to the students of St. Gallen, who are all beautifully dressed in ties and shirts and frocks, to get the spirit of 1968 and become contemporary revolutionaries.
Or better still, Philip, 1947.
But that means you've got to be active. When you get into that workplace, the labor market's going to shift. You're going to be so much in demand. Therefore, you have to be a revolutionary think about change, about my stake in the business, my voice in the business. We have to look again at active labor market policies. We are spending less in the G20 on active labor market policies than we were before the crisis. There is a chronic underinvestment in people. So some bright political leader has to get out there with a message about, we are not going to leave you behind, and we are going to accompany you. Business has to improve its human rights. Look at the Ruggie principles of rights, respect, and remedy. Let's deal with the adverse consequences of human rights, and let's say that business has a broader social purpose. The government responsibility is real, and our job, I have to be difficult. I have to be emotional. When I'm dealing with a factory in Bangladesh where 1,133 people, Bangladesh workers, lost their lives in a building that collapsed in minutes, I get emotional. When I have union leaders in Colombia, 3,700 people like me, assassinated because we stood up for our rights, I get emotional. When I see 150 million kids at work, I get emotional. And I ask the business leaders to get emotional about their people and understand the lives that they are leading, the families they are bringing up. It's a shame that parents feel that they're going to be less well off, than their kids are going to be less well off than them. How heartbreaking it is for them that the kids who invest these formative years of their lives can't find gainful employment. Please, business, get used to less. Pay your taxes. Worry about the climate. And let's get a sense on we haven't spoken about data. There's some interesting wage bargaining about the value of data. We have to tackle the sheer economic power of these big five, the FANGs, the so-called. This should not be a new normal. They have overwhelming economic power. They're not just the platforms. It has an influence on democracy. And then at the workplace, we're going to find that every breath we take, every move we make is somehow going to be monitored. So, well, thank you, Sting, for that one. Anyway, so, this is a time for emotion. It is a time for answers. It is a time for people to stand up and take their responsibility. There are solutions. And there are ways through this, Nina. I could go on at great length.
Except it's a time for time's up, as it says on the bottom of the screen.
Lord Griffiths is a Welshman, and we ignore things like time is up. So, thank you very much.
Philip, Jennings, thank you very much, and also Roberto Santos, thank you. Thank you to the audience. Just briefly to say, as Philip pointed out, there are so many issues. We didn't get a chance to talk about corporate social responsibility, data, as you said, but please continue to have these discussions over the next couple of days here at the St. Gallen Symposium, because that's what this is about, the future of work. Thank you very much, Jason.